The wedding guests were already on their feet when the noise from the sky made everyone look up. A sleek aircraft descended over the Carter estate, and before anybody could understand what was happening, Nia Monroe stepped out with 3 children at her side. The music stopped, the bride froze, and then one little boy pointed straight at the groom and asked,
"Mom, is that my dad?"
The entire crowd went silent, because the man standing at the altar, the same man preparing to marry another woman, looked exactly like those children, and in that one breathless moment, the perfect wedding began to collapse. It all began long before the tears, long before the betrayal, and long before the truth shattered a wedding. Back then, Nia Monroe was just a college student with a gentle smile and a heart too big for this hard world. She was a brilliant young Black American woman, respected across campus for her sharp mind, her kindness, and the quiet faith that guided her every step. If a classmate was failing, Nia stayed behind to help. If someone was hungry, she shared what little she had. If somebody felt like giving up, Nia was the one who spoke hope back into them. That was how Ethan Carter came into her life. Ethan was everything people noticed the moment he entered a room. He was a handsome young black man from a wealthy and respected family, polished, ambitious, and naturally confident. He carried himself like somebody already destined for success. But beneath the charm and expensive clothes, Ethan was struggling to keep up with the pressure around him. His grades were slipping, his pride was bruised, and for the first time in his life, the future did not feel guaranteed. Nia saw that side of him when nobody else did. She stayed up late helping him study. She encouraged him when he wanted to quit. She reminded him that failure in one season did not mean failure for life. And slowly, the friendship turned into something deeper. Ethan began depending on her. Then he began loving her. "You believe in me more than anybody," he told her one evening outside the library. Nia smiled softly. "That's because I see who you can become." And Ethan held her hand and answered, "Then when I become that man, I want you beside me." Those words settled deep in her heart. Not far from them was another student who noticed everything, even if he barely spoke. His name was Malik Vaughn. He was a quiet scholarship student, serious, intelligent, and always carrying more burden than he showed. He did not come from money. He came from struggle. And during one critical semester, when he was close to losing everything, Nia had stepped in and helped him pass a course that could have ended his education. Malik never forgot it. He never forgot her kindness. He simply stayed in the background, watching, grateful, and silent. As the months passed, Nia and Ethan became inseparable. He spoke boldly about the future. He said they would build a home together. He said they would get married. He said they would have children running through a big house one day. He painted the picture so clearly that Nia stopped wondering if she belonged in his life. She believed she already did, but not everyone was happy. The first warning came in the form of Ethan's mother, Vanessa Carter. Vanessa was a sophisticated, sharp-eyed woman who valued class, image, and family legacy above everything else. The first time she met Nia, she smiled politely, but the warmth never reached her eyes. She looked Nia over too carefully. She asked sweet questions that felt like hidden tests, and when Nia left the room, Vanessa's silence said more than words ever could. "She's nice," Vanessa told Ethan once, "but being nice is not the same as being suitable." Ethan brushed it off. He laughed. He kissed Nia's forehead later and told her not to worry about anything. Still, while Nia leaned into love, Vanessa stood back and watched with quiet disapproval. And one night, with his arm around Nia and his voice full of certainty, Ethan looked into her eyes and said, "Very soon, I want us to start building our family." Nia's heart swelled, but across the room, Vanessa Carter said nothing. She only watched, and in that silence, the first crack had already begun. A few years after that quiet warning, the love story Nia once trusted so deeply began to change under the weight of expectation. College was over. Ethan Carter was no longer the struggling young man fighting to pass exams. He had stepped into the polished life everyone expected from him. He worked inside the Carter business world, wore confidence like a second skin, and spoke more boldly than ever about marriage. To the outside world, he and Nia Monroe looked like a couple headed straight for forever. And for a while, Nia believed that too. They toured venues, they talked about engagement dates, they laughed over baby names during late dinners. Ethan still held her close and made promises that sounded steady. But behind all of that, one voice kept pressing harder and harder. Vanessa Carter. She had stopped hiding her agenda. She wanted grandchildren, and she wanted them quickly. To her, marriage was not just about love. It was about lineage, legacy, image, control. "Love is fine," Vanessa said one evening in her elegant dining room, "but a family must be built on results." Nia felt the sting in those words. Ethan heard it too. But instead of stopping his mother, he only shifted in his seat and looked away. Then came the test that changed everything. Under pressure from Vanessa, Ethan and Nia agreed to fertility testing before marriage. It was supposed to be practical, sensible, responsible. That was how Vanessa framed it. But what should have been a private medical step soon became the doorway to emotional ruin. The doctor's office was cold, too bright, too silent. The first result hit Ethan hard. He had a low sperm count. Conception would be difficult. It was not impossible, but it would take time, patience, and maybe treatment. Ethan's face changed. The confident man Nia knew sat there frozen, wounded in a place his pride could not hide. Nia reached for his hand immediately. "We'll face this together." But the meeting was not over. The doctor explained that Nia also had reproductive complications of her own. Her path to pregnancy could also be difficult. The room went still. What should have pulled them closer started pushing fear into the space between them. At first, Nia thought they would go home, pray, cry, and hold each other through it. Instead, Vanessa turned the diagnosis into a weapon. In private, she cornered Nia with that same polished cruelty she wore so well. "A Carter man needs security," Vanessa said. "A woman who cannot secure the family line is a risk." Nia stared at her, stunned. "The doctor said both of us may face challenges." But Vanessa lifted her chin. "My son will not be the one blamed when this falls apart." That was the beginning of the humiliation. Ethan changed slowly, then all at once. He became distant, short-tempered, cold in moments where Nia needed tenderness. The man who once leaned on her now withdrew from her. He stopped defending her. He stopped protecting her from his mother's poison. And one night, after an argument filled with pain, pressure, and silence that had gone on too long, Ethan broke her heart with one sentence. "What if you never give me children, Nia?" The room felt like it split open. Nia looked at him as if she no longer knew the man in front of her. "I stood by you," she whispered, "and this is what you say to me?" But before Ethan could take the words back, Vanessa stepped in and made it worse. Her eyes were cold, her voice was calm. "Maybe it is better to leave now than waste more years." That did it. Nia's face crumpled, the tears came fast, and the deepest wound was not the diagnosis. It was this: the man who should have comforted her had become the one who crushed her. With shaking hands and a shattered heart, Nia walked out of the Carter house in tears, and this time, nobody stopped her. The morning after Nia Monroe walked out of the Carter house in tears, the world did not stop for her pain. That was the cruel part. Cars still moved, phones still rang, people still laughed somewhere. But for Nia, everything felt broken. She had not just lost a relationship. She had lost the future she had been promised. The man she defended, prayed for, and loved with her whole heart had let fear and pride speak louder than loyalty. So Nia disappeared quietly. She left the places Ethan might look. She stopped answering old calls. She took a small apartment on the other side of the city and tried to rebuild her life in silence. Some days she sat by the window praying. Some nights she cried so hard she had to cover her mouth to keep the neighbors from hearing. She kept telling herself to breathe, to stand, to survive. Then her body began to change. At first, she blamed stress, the exhaustion, the dizziness, the sudden nausea. But deep down, Nia knew something felt different. With trembling hands and a heart full of fear, she went to a doctor alone. She was pregnant. The words hit her so hard she could barely speak. For one long moment, Nia only stared. Tears gathered in her eyes. Ethan's cruel sentence rang in her memory. "What if you never give me children, Nia?" And now this. Now, after rejection, after humiliation, after being made to feel like she was not enough. But the shock was not over. A second examination confirmed what sounded almost impossible. Nia was not carrying one baby, she was carrying triplets. Nia broke down right there in the office. She covered her face and cried the kind of cries that comes from a wounded place too deep for words. Not because she was unhappy, not because the babies were unwanted, but because the miracle had come after the heartbreak. The blessing had arrived too late to protect her from the cruelty she had already endured. "How can this be happening now?" she whispered through tears. The doctor spoke gently, but Nia barely heard her. Her mind was spinning. She was alone, pregnant, carrying 3 children, and the father was the same man who had let her walk away in shame. Days later, still overwhelmed, Nia stepped out of a pharmacy with a paper bag in one hand and fear in the other. She moved slowly, weak from stress and nausea. Her vision blurred for a second. She nearly stumbled on the curb. A black luxury car stopped, the back door opened, and out stepped a man Nia had not seen in years. Malik Vaughn. He was no longer the quiet scholarship student from college. Time had sharpened him. He was now a powerful black billionaire with a calm, commanding presence, dressed in tailored simplicity and carrying the kind of discipline wealth could not buy. But his eyes were still the same, steady, observant, and kind. "Nia?" he said, stunned. She looked up, shocked. "Malik?" One glance told him something was wrong. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. Her smile did not reach her eyes. He did not press her. He did not embarrass her. He simply stepped closer and said, "You don't look well. Let me help." Nia straightened, pride rising through her pain. "I'm fine." Malik's voice softened. "No, you're not." That truth broke through the wall she had been holding up. He took her to sit down. He bought her water. He waited until her breathing calmed. And when he learned she was pregnant and alone, something in his face changed. Not judgment, not pity, but deep concern. "You should not be carrying this by yourself," he told her quietly. Nia looked away, ashamed of needing anyone. "I don't want charity." Malik shook his head. "Then don't call it charity. Call it what it is. Help from someone who remembers what you did for him." For the first time since leaving Ethan, Nia felt the possibility of safety. And before that difficult day ended, with nowhere else to turn and too much ahead of her to face alone, Nia accepted temporary refuge under Malik Vaughn's protection. A few days after Nia accepted Malik Vaughn's help, she entered a world that felt nothing like the one she had just escaped. Malik's home was large, quiet, and heavily guarded. But what struck Nia most was not the wealth. It was the peace. No cold stares, no cruel whispers, no one measuring her worth. For the first time in a long time, she could breathe without feeling judged. Malik made one thing clear from the very beginning. In his home, Nia would be treated with dignity. "She is a guest," he told his staff firmly, "and anybody who disrespects her answers to me." That mattered more than he knew. Nia settled in slowly. She kept mostly to herself at first, still carrying the bruises of betrayal in her heart. Some mornings she sat by the window with a hand over her growing stomach, praying in silence. Some nights she woke up from dreams of Ethan's voice and had to remind herself she was no longer in that world. Malik never forced conversation. He gave her space, but he was always near when she needed anything. A doctor's appointment, a meal she could keep down, a quiet ride when the walls felt too heavy. And without saying it, Malik began falling for her all over again. He saw her strength in the way she kept standing. He saw her tenderness in the way she already spoke to the babies as if they could hear her. He saw her pain too, but he kept his feelings buried. This was not the time for his heart. This was about keeping her safe. Then the pregnancy became complicated. Because Nia was carrying triplets, the medical risks rose quickly. Her body grew weaker. She was put on strict monitoring. The doctors warned of early labor, blood pressure issues, and the possibility of a dangerous delivery. Malik listened to every word with a hard face, but inside, fear was building. One stormy night, the pain started. Nia doubled over in her room, gripping the edge of the bed as a sharp wave tore through her body. A second one followed, then another. By the time Malik reached her, she was trembling. "It's too early," she gasped. He did not panic. He called the medical team, wrapped her in a blanket, and stayed with her all the way to the hospital. But once they rushed her into the delivery wing, he could do nothing except wait. And he waited like a man fighting invisible fire. Hours passed. Nurses moved quickly. Doctors spoke in tense tones. Malik stood outside the operating room with both hands locked together, praying under his breath. He did not care about his money. He did not care about his power. In that moment, he was just a helpless man begging God not to let her die. Inside, Nia was slipping in and out of strength. The delivery was brutal. Her body was exhausted. Her heart was racing. At one point, the doctors feared they might lose her, and in that terrible moment she cried out, not for revenge, not for Ethan, but for the children. "Please," she whispered weakly, "save my babies." Then, by mercy, the cries came. One baby, then another, then a third. 3 tiny voices filled the room, and Nia survived. By the time a nurse stepped out to speak, Malik's face was pale with fear. Then he heard the words, "She made it. The babies made it too." He broke. The tears came before he could stop them. When he was finally allowed to see them, he stood there looking at the 3 newborns in disbelief. Noah, Micah, and little Eden, fragile, beautiful, alive. And when Nia held them in her arms for the first time, weak but breathing, tears sliding down her face, she understood something that changed her forever. The life that had been rejected was now her greatest miracle. Months after that dangerous night in the hospital, Nia Monroe's world no longer sounded like silence and sorrow. Now it sounded like crying, laughter, tiny footsteps, spilled cereal, and 3 little voices calling her name at the same time. Motherhood came fast and hard. Raising triplets was not gentle work. It was beautiful, but it was exhausting. Noah was the bold one, always moving, always testing limits. Micah was softer, more observant, the child who noticed feelings before words were spoken. And little Eden was bright, playful, and full of innocent questions that could make a room laugh one moment and cry the next. They filled the house with life. They also filled Nia's heart in ways pain never could. But she was not doing it alone. Malik Vaughn became a constant presence in their daily lives. He never tried to replace anyone. He simply showed up. He handled doctor visits when Nia was overwhelmed. He made sure the children had books, clothes, and everything they needed before she even asked. He sat on the floor building toy sets. He listened to Noah's wild stories, answered Micah's serious questions, and let Eden climb into his lap with sticky hands and no apology. The children trusted him naturally. One evening, after helping the triplets settle down, Malik found Nia in the kitchen, exhausted but smiling faintly. "You don't have to carry all of this by yourself," he said gently. Nia looked at him, already knowing there was more behind those words. Malik took a breath. "Marry me, Nia." The room went still. It was not a dramatic proposal. No crowd, no ring lifted high for attention. Just a good man speaking from a sincere heart. Nia's eyes softened immediately. She was touched, deeply touched, but she also knew the truth before he finished speaking. "You are kind to me," she said quietly. "You have been more than I can ever repay, but I can't marry you out of gratitude." Malik nodded, even though disappointment flashed across his face. "I don't want gratitude. I want a chance." Nia's voice trembled. "And I can't give you a half-healed heart." He did not argue. That was who Malik was. He respected her no even when it hurt him. Time passed, and he asked again in another season. Still gentle, still steady, still not forcing her. And once again, Nia refused. This time she was even more honest. "My children need my full heart right now," she told him, "and the rest of me is still trying to heal." Malik accepted it, even while loving her more. But Nia refused to let her story become one long testimony of pain. Instead, she turned her wounds into purpose. She began working on something close to her heart, a community learning school for older adults, a place where elderly men and women who never had the chance to get a formal education could finally learn without shame. Grandmothers learned to read for the first time. Retired laborers learned to write their names. Forgotten people found dignity in classrooms filled with patience instead of judgment. And she did not stop there. Moved by everything she had survived, Nia also began building an orphanage home for vulnerable children in the community, determined to create the kind of safety she once wished she had. People started speaking her name with respect, not because she had suffered, but because she had chosen to build after breaking. And as the chapter of her life closed on survival and opened into service, one thing became clear. Nia Monroe was no longer just a woman who had been rejected. She was becoming a woman the community would never forget. While Nia Monroe was building a life filled with purpose, Ethan Carter was building one that looked perfect from the outside and hollow on the inside. By then, years had passed since he let Nia walk away. Ethan had fully stepped into the world his family always planned for him. He was polished, successful, and constantly surrounded by the kind of wealth that made people assume he had everything. His suits were sharper, his schedule was fuller, his name carried more influence now. But behind that clean image was a man who had become emotionally closed off, almost mechanical. He smiled when required, he performed when necessary. But peace, that was gone. Vanessa Carter remained exactly what she had always been. Elegant, controlling, and obsessed with appearances. She pushed Ethan harder than ever to move on completely and bury the past. "You cannot keep living in old mistakes," she told him one evening. "A Carter man recovers. He does not dwell." So Ethan did what looked expected. He entered a serious relationship with Janelle Brooks, a polished Black American woman from an elite and highly connected family. Janelle was beautiful, poised, educated, and the kind of woman Vanessa could proudly introduce in any room. She knew how to speak to donors, smile for cameras, and carry herself with perfect control. On paper, she was everything a man like Ethan was supposed to want. And for a while, their relationship impressed everyone. They attended events together. They looked powerful, standing side by side. Their pictures appeared in social circles with captions about elegance, legacy, and the next great Carter Union. But in private, something was missing. Their conversations often felt careful instead of warm. Their chemistry looked better in public than it felt in silence. Janelle was not cruel, but she was guarded. Ethan was present physically, yet emotionally somewhere else. Still, under pressure, he proposed. He told himself it was time. Time to move forward. Time to stop thinking about the woman he had hurt. Time to become the man his family expected again. Janelle said yes, and the engagement was celebrated loudly. But behind the scenes, an old wound quietly returned. The fertility issue Ethan once tried to outrun had never truly disappeared. His low sperm count was still a reality, because now Ethan could not lie to himself. He remembered exactly how quickly he had let fear turn into blame. He remembered Nia's face the night he wounded her. He remembered her tears, and for the first time, he had to confront a truth that shamed him deeply. He had judged Nia unfairly. He had made her carry pain that was never hers alone. That realization followed him everywhere. At dinners with Janelle, he found himself comparing her polished distance to Nia's warmth. In quiet moments, he remembered the way Nia used to encourage him when he was weak. Even the things he tried hardest to bury started rising again. A laugh, a phrase, a memory outside a college library. Vanessa saw the change and shut it down immediately. "Do not reopen old wounds," she warned sharply. "What is done is done." But old wounds do not stay buried just because people demand silence. One night, long after everyone else had gone to bed, Ethan stood alone in his office holding an old photo from his college days. In it, Nia was smiling beside him, full of hope, long before he became the man who broke her heart. And as he stared at that forgotten piece of his past, Ethan finally admitted what he had been hiding even from himself. He never truly got over her, and when discussions about the future became more serious, another painful truth surfaced. Janelle also had reproductive complications of her own. Suddenly, the same kind of tension he once faced with Nia was now inside this new relationship too. Only this time, the truth hit harder. As Ethan Carter wrestled with the ghost of the woman he had never truly forgotten, life on Nia Monroe's side kept moving forward, until the questions she had feared for years finally arrived. By then, Noah, Micah, and Eden were no longer small enough to distract with simple answers and bedtime hugs, alone. They were older now, sharper, more observant. They noticed things. They listened when adults thought they were not listening. And slowly, the quiet absence in their home began to take shape in their minds. It started with little moments. At school, they saw fathers showing up to events, carrying backpacks, clapping at performances, kneeling to fix shoelaces, and lifting children into their arms. At church, they saw other families sit in full rows, mothers and fathers together. At community gatherings, they heard classmates say, "My dad is coming," or "My dad taught me that." The triplets said nothing at first, but children notice what is missing long before they learn how to name it. Noah was the first to speak. Bold by nature, he did not like confusion sitting in his chest too long. One afternoon after school, he dropped his bag by the door and asked, "Mom, how come everybody else has a dad at school stuff, but we don't?" The room went still. Nia, who had been sorting papers for the Adult Learning Center, froze with one hand on the table. Before she could answer, Micah stepped in softly, his voice smaller but no less painful. "Did our dad go somewhere?" And then Eden, with the innocent honesty only a child could carry, looked up at her mother and asked, "Does he know we're here?" That question hit Nia like a wound opening all over again. For a moment she could not speak. She looked at their faces, 3 children born from pain, raised in love, now staring at her, for the truth. She had always told herself she was protecting them, that there would be a better time, that she could wait until they were older, stronger, ready. But standing there in that kitchen, she realized there was no perfect time for a truth that had already waited too long. That night, after the children went to bed, Nia sat alone and cried. She cried quietly, the way wounded mothers do when they do not want their pain to become another burden in the house. She cried because her children were now carrying a question she could no longer shield them from. She cried because silence had finally stopped feeling like protection. The next morning brought another difficult moment. Malik Vaughn had come by early with breakfast and supplies for the orphanage project. The children ran to him like they always did, but this time the energy shifted. Noah folded his arms. Micah looked uncertain. Eden stayed close to Malik's side, then asked the question that made the room fall silent all over again. "Uncle Malik," she said gently, "are you our daddy?" Malik's expression changed instantly. He crouched down so he was eye level with them. He could have lied to make things easy. He could have said something vague and delayed the truth, but he respected them too much for that. "No," he said softly. "I'm not your father, but I do love you very much." Micah looked down. Noah's jaw tightened. Eden blinked as if she were trying to understand why someone who cared so much was not the answer to the question in their hearts. Nia stood there, shattered by the tenderness of the moment. That was when she knew. The truth could not stay buried any longer. Later that evening, after prayer and a long battle in her own heart, Nia made the decision she had resisted for years. No matter how painful it would be, her children deserved to know where they came from. And as she looked out the window into the deepening night, Nia Monroe prepared herself to face the past she had spent so long trying to survive. The following week, after nights of prayer and almost no sleep, Nia Monroe finally acted on the decision that had been tearing her apart. She would take the children to see Ethan Carter. Not to beg, not to chase the past, not to reopen old romance. She was doing it for Noah, Micah, and Eden, the three hearts who deserved answers. Still, even with that purpose steady in her chest, the journey felt heavy. She knew one meeting could change everything. It could heal. It could destroy. It could do both at once. When Malik Vaughn learned what she had decided, the pain flashed across his face before he buried it. He did not argue. He did not guilt her. He did what he had always done. He chose her peace over his own comfort. "Then you should go with dignity," he said quietly. That was the one and only time Malik used his private jet for Nia. He arranged the trip for her and the children so they could travel safely, quickly, and without public chaos. Noah was excited the moment he realized they were flying in something so grand. Micah stayed close to Nia, sensing the seriousness beneath the polished seats and soft cabin lights. Eden pressed her tiny hands to the window and asked innocent questions the whole way. "Mommy, is our dad going to know us right away?" Nia forced a small smile, but her heart was pounding too hard to answer easily. "I don't know, baby." What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that they were flying straight into a storm already in progress. That same day, Ethan Carter's wedding to Janelle Brooks was underway. The Carter estate was covered in luxury. White flowers lined the aisle. Music drifted through the air. Guests in expensive clothes smiled for cameras and whispered over champagne. Vanessa Carter moved through the crowd like a queen guarding a victory she believed she had finally secured. Janelle stood dressed in elegance, poised and breathtaking, ready to become the woman who would officially step into Nia's old place. And Ethan? He looked perfect from a distance, but inside he was restless. Even in his tailored suit, even with everyone watching, there was a stiffness in him that no one could fully explain. It was as if his spirit knew something his mind had not yet faced. Then the ceremony stopped before it could truly begin. A sudden disturbance at the front gates turned heads. Staff rushed, guests started murmuring, and moments later, Nia Monroe stepped into view with the 3 children beside her. Silence spread like a shockwave. Nia stood tall, dressed with simple dignity, her face calm, even though her heartbeat felt wild. Noah, Micah, and Eden stood close, looking around with open curiosity. At first, the guests only stared because she was unexpected. Then they looked again, at the children, and the resemblance hit. A jawline, a set of eyes, the shape of a smile. The whispers grew louder. Those children looked just like Ethan. Janelle's expression changed first. Confusion, then disbelief, then humiliation. She turned slowly toward Ethan, whose face had drained of color. The children, not understanding the full explosion around them, made it worse without meaning to. Noah pointed straight ahead. "Mom, is that him?" Micah stared at Ethan, then frowned. "Why does he look like us?" And little Eden, in the clearest voice of all, asked the question that seemed to rip through the entire ceremony. "Is this the daddy we came to find?" The wedding shattered in that moment. Janelle took a step back as if the truth itself had struck her. Guests began openly whispering now. Cameras lowered, smiles vanished. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the 3 children who looked so painfully, undeniably like him, that no lie in the world could save him. Then Vanessa saw them clearly, and she understood everything. The woman who had once dismissed Nia as unfit now stood face to face with living proof of the miracle she had helped cast out. The shame hit her all at once, public, brutal, undeniable. She clutched at her chest, staggered, and collapsed in front of the crowd. Screams broke out. People rushed forward. The music cut off. The ceremony dissolved into pure chaos. And at the center of it all, Ethan Carter could do nothing but stare at Nia, and at the family he once rejected, standing right in front of him. In the hours after the wedding collapsed, the Carter estate no longer looked like a place of celebration. It looked like the scene of a truth too long delayed. Guests left in waves, carrying gossip with them. The flowers were still standing, but the joy was gone. The music had stopped. The cameras were gone. Even the air felt different, heavy with shame, anger, and consequences. Vanessa Carter had been rushed inside for medical attention, and the family that once cared so much about appearances was now watching those appearances crumble in real time. And standing in the middle of that ruin was Ethan Carter. He had no speech prepared for this, no smooth explanation, no polished defense, just the brutal sight of Nia Monroe and 3 children whose faces reflected his own. Janelle Brooks was the first to break the silence. She turned to Ethan slowly, her wedding gown still untouched, her voice shaking with fury. "You let me walk down an aisle into a lie." "Janelle?" "No." Her eyes filled with tears, but her posture stayed strong. "You don't get to explain this away. Not today." Then she looked at Nia, at the children, and finally back at Ethan with a bitterness that came from humiliation, not cruelty. "Whatever this is, I refuse to be part of it." And just like that, Janelle ended it. She walked away from the wedding, the relationship, and the future that had been announced so loudly only hours earlier. Her family followed quickly behind her, and with that, Ethan lost the life he had been pretending was whole. But losing Janelle was not the deepest pain. The deepest pain came when he tried to step toward his children, and they stepped back. Noah moved first, instinctively placing himself in front of Nia and his siblings. His young face was hard with distrust. "Don't come close." Micah stared at Ethan with wounded eyes. "If you're really our dad, where were you?" And little Eden, who had asked the most innocent question at the wedding, now looked at him with quiet sadness that cut deeper than anger ever could. "Why didn't you come before?" Those words hit Ethan harder than any public humiliation, because there was no excuse that could survive the honesty of a child. He looked at Nia then, his voice low, stripped of pride. "I'm sorry." Nia held his gaze, but her face did not soften. Too much had happened. Too many years had passed. Sorry does not rebuild what you broke. And she was right. For once, Ethan did not argue. The days that followed became a war for trust. He began showing up, not with grand gestures, not with public speeches, but with quiet consistency. He asked permission before visiting. He came without demanding affection. He listened more than he spoke. When Noah glared at him, Ethan accepted it. When Micah challenged every word, Ethan answered patiently. When Eden stayed close to her mother and watched him like a stranger, he did not force closeness. He let the distance speak for itself. That was new for him. So was what happened next. For the first time in his life, Ethan confronted Vanessa without obeying her. Inside the Carter home, his voice shook with anger and years of buried regret. "You helped destroy my life." Vanessa, pale and weakened after the collapse, looked at him in disbelief. "I tried to protect this family." "No," Ethan said sharply. "You protected an image, and I let you. I blamed Naya. I let her suffer. I let my own children grow up without me." Vanessa had no answer strong enough for that truth. Meanwhile, Malik Vaughn stayed exactly who he had always been, steady, disciplined, and honorable. He did not use Ethan's failure to manipulate Nia. He did not poison the children against their father. Instead, he stepped back with dignity, even though every step cost him. His silence was not weakness. It was sacrifice, and that sacrifice made Nia's conflict even deeper. One man was finally showing repentance. The other had shown loyalty all along. Still, Ethan kept returning, not because he had been forgiven, not because the children welcomed him, but because he had finally understood something painful and simple. Fatherhood was not a title he could claim in a day. It was a trust he would have to earn. And by the end of that bitter chapter, with his pride gone and his past laid bare, Ethan Carter made one quiet decision. Even if nobody forgave him quickly, he would keep trying. In the weeks after Ethan Carter chose to keep trying, something slowly began to shift. Not all at once, not like a miracle falling from the sky, but like a hard heart softening one honest moment at a time. He kept showing up. That was what changed everything. Not speeches, not money, not guilt, just presence. Ethan came when he said he would come. He sat through awkward silences without trying to control them. He listened when Noah tested him with hard questions. He stayed patient when Micah treated every promise like something that still needed proof. And with Eden, he learned the deepest lessons of all, because she did not hide her feelings behind anger. She simply looked at him with those wide, searching eyes and asked the kind of things grown men struggle to answer. One afternoon, while he helped the children with a school project, Eden tilted her head and asked, "If you love us now, are you going to disappear again?" The room fell silent. Ethan swallowed hard. He put down the paper in his hand and answered with painful honesty. "No, I already lost too much. I won't choose that again." This time, the children believed him a little more. That was how healing came. Small, fragile, but real. Noah was the last to soften openly. His pain had turned into protectiveness, and he wore that protectiveness like armor around Nia and his siblings. But even Noah could not ignore what he kept seeing. Ethan came back. He remembered details. He listened. He apologized without getting defensive. He stopped trying to impress them and started trying to understand them. Micah noticed it too. Quiet as he was, he saw the changes before anyone said them aloud. He saw that Ethan no longer acted like a man demanding a place. He acted like a man trying to earn one. And then came the moment that broke the wall. During a family outing, arranged carefully by Nia, one simple accident changed the air between them. Eden stumbled and fell hard enough to frighten everyone. Before Nia could even move, Ethan was there, lifting her gently, checking her knees, his face full of pure panic and care. He held her like a father who had been afraid of losing something precious. Eden clung to him, crying for only a moment before calming in his arms. Noah saw it, Micah saw it, Nia saw it, and something settled in all of them. Later that evening, the children made the step Ethan had not dared to expect so soon. It was not dramatic, it was not loud, but it was everything. They accepted him, not perfectly, not without memory, but sincerely. He was no longer just the stranger from a broken wedding. He was their father, a flawed one, a late one, but now a present one. Ethan wept in private after that, not because he deserved their acceptance, but because he knew he had been given something he once threw away. He apologized to Nia again after that, this time with no attempt to pull her heart back by force. "I hurt you," he said quietly, "and I can't undo it. I'm not asking you to forget. I just want to keep doing right by them, and by you, if you ever let me." Nia heard the sincerity in his voice, but her final decision was not about guilt, history, or pressure. It came after deep prayer, reflection, and watching both men closely, because there was also Malik Vaughn. When the time came, Malik did the hardest, purest thing a man in love can do. He looked at Nia, the woman he had protected, respected, and quietly loved for years, and he released her from any sense of debt. "Real love does not trap you," he told her softly. "If your peace leads you somewhere else, I will still want that peace for you." That one sentence showed his true character more than any proposal ever could. In the end, Nia made a mature and painful choice, rooted not in fantasy, but in truth, responsibility, and where her heart could finally rest. She chose the path that honored healing, family restoration, and the future her children now needed. It was not a careless decision, it was a grown woman's decision, a prayerful one, and life kept moving. Nia's school, for older adults, expanded, with more elders enrolling, more lives changing, and more dignity being restored. The orphanage opened fully, becoming a refuge for vulnerable children in the community. What began in pain had become purpose. What began in rejection had become service. Vanessa Carter, forced to face the destruction her pride had caused, learned a lesson too late, but learned it nonetheless. Image without love can destroy an entire family. Ethan learned that fatherhood is not proven by blood alone. It is proven by presence, repentance, patience, and commitment. And the children, Noah, Micah, and Eden, ended the story no longer carrying the silent ache of fatherlessness in their hearts. The final lesson was clear and unforgettable. Never reduce a person to a diagnosis. Never let pride speak louder than love. And never assume a broken beginning cannot become a blessed ending. What this story teaches us is simple but powerful. Never judge a person by a painful season in their life. A diagnosis is not the end of someone's story. Pride can destroy love, but humility, patience, and responsibility can help rebuild what was broken. Real love is not just about feelings. It is about sacrifice, showing up, telling the truth, and standing by the people who need you most. And sometimes, the blessing people reject today becomes the very miracle they pray for tomorrow. Now I want to hear from you. Who was your favorite character in this story, and why? Was it Nia for her strength and compassion, Malik for his loyalty and sacrifice, or Ethan for fighting to make things right in the end? Drop your answer in the comments. I really want to know what you think. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Your support helps this channel grow and keeps these powerful stories coming. This is Mr. Hope, and I'll see you in the next story.